The show where anything goes. Motivation, mindset, recovery, philosophy, and life. We become who we are through what we experience. We all have a story, and this is My Backstory with Josh Boyer.
What's up, everyone? Here we are on the My Backstory podcast, episode number 24 with George Fox from NFW Watches. So a little backstory on how I got linked up with George. I was actually doing a podcast with Joshua Coburn out in Grinnell, Iowa, and he was wearing this sick-ass watch when we went to dinner. And so I asked him about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, it's NFW Watches." I was like, "Yeah, I've seen them on Instagram actually." And so, and then I did another podcast with Ray Kerr, and he also was wearing a pretty badass watch. So they were both NFW watches. And so anyway, George and I ended up linking up, and he was out here in California. So I was like, "Hey man, you want to be on the podcast?" He's like, "Yeah, totally." So here we are in Chino Hills, California, doing this podcast. And I'm going to let George share his story with you about his life, kind of where he grew up, and what got him to start NFW Watches, what NFW stands for, and what he's up to now. So George, go ahead and take it away, man.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, sure.
First, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for having me on the podcast. And so basically, it's funny, people always ask me, what does NFW mean? Right. So let's just cover that right off the bat here. So NFW stands for nice fucking watches.
I love it. I love it.
And it's kind of like Listerine. Says what it does what it says. Yeah. Right? So it's kind of like the guardrails that keep me in line. Got to live up to the name, right?
Yeah, for sure. I love it, man.
So so we're a watch company. We make some really nice, tough timepieces.
Absolutely.
And I haven't had a traditional career path by any means. I started off as a professional windsurfer.
Oh wow!
Back in the 80s.
Oh, that's super cool.
And it was a blast. I almost died a few times, but that was fun. Yeah. And from there, I became a metal sculptor, furniture designer.
Wow.
So more of an artist, and that was pretty cool. I made pieces actually for people like Elton John and Madonna, so that was pretty cool. But after basically doing that for 5 years, where I was in the metal studio with my senses cut off to the world, like literally, like I would be wearing goggles, a respirator, earplugs, gloves. So literally all of my senses were cut off to the world all day, every day.
Right.
And I was pretty much living inside my head, which can be a scary place.
Oh, for sure.
So I ended up getting a job at Timex.
Yeah. And
I knew nothing about watches, but
how did you land that job? How did that even come about?
It was back in the days when jobs were advertised in the newspapers.
Dated yourself.
Yeah, I know, right? Actually, people are saying, "What the hell's a newspaper?"
Right.
And but the job description read something like, "Do you know about marketing? Do you know about product design?" Yeah, and things like that. And I'm thinking like, yeah, I design stuff and I run a business, and yeah, I can do this. So I sent them a catalog of all my work versus sending a resume.
Yeah.
And somehow even though I knew nothing about watches, they ended up hiring me. And I worked there for 10 years and learned the entire watch business. It was a great experience. And quick story, my first day on the job, I guess Timex had just gotten the license agreement to make watches for Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right? And so my boss hands me a digital watch and a Klingon language book, because for Star Trek, you remember the Klingons?
Yeah.
Well, they actually had created a whole language for them.
That's a trip.
Like full out language. I had no idea. So he hands me the Klingon dictionary and the watch. And he says, "Here, figure out how this watch works and then write the instruction manual for it. Oh, and you got to write it in English and in Klingon." I'm like, oh man, this is going to be an interesting job, huh?
Nice.
So, but I spent 10 years there, and I did a lot of things such as designing the watches, doing the brand building, market research, really the full 360.
What was your actual job title when you were there?
I was what's called a brand manager, and I also worked on all the Disney licensed watches.
Right.
And that was a great experience working with Disney. And I would travel. I would go to China, visit the factories. I would go on trend research trips. I would go to Paris to look at fashion trends. I would go to Tokyo to look at technology trends.
Rough duty.
Yeah. So, it was great, man. I would fly first class international.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
It's like, Mr. Fox, more Dom Perignon? Why, yes.
Sure.
Why not? Yes, fill me up again. But
awesome. That's on the bucket list for me, man. I've never flown. I've flown first class, but never internationally. So I want to do that at least once. I don't drink, so it probably won't be as cool, I guess, because that's part of the deal. It's like you get first class, you get to drink and eat all you want, whatever. But
yeah, well, the food is good.
Is it?
Yeah, oh yeah, they'll give you these awesome Alaskan king crab legs. And
really?
Yeah. The first class food international.
Okay.
It's like you're in a great restaurant.
Oh, nice, man.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that. I thought it was all that processed crap, they serve the omelet.
No, that's back in the cattle car, which is where I travel now.
Yes, I like it.
Now that it's my money spent.
Yeah.
So
there's two guys actually that Gordon Ramsay, I think, is one of them, and Anthony Bourdain, rest in peace. But those are two chefs that were like, nope, they will not eat airplane food. Never. That's one food they would not eat.
Really?
And so ever since I heard that, I was like, and he's like, when have you ever heard of anybody eating airplane food and feeling good after? And I was like, actually, that's a good point, because every time I, eat it, get gassy and you're all bloated and just nasty, whatever. So I never eat airplane food. Whenever I travel, it's like, now I'll bring food with me, or I just don't eat,
Yeah. Well, nowadays they don't really give you much anyway.
Yeah. You can pay $5 for a snack.
Yeah. Yeah. You get the little bag of pretzels.
Yeah, seriously. It's ridiculous.
Cup of water. That's it.
Can I get some water? Yeah, that'll be $5. Come on. Anyway.
So, but anyway, yeah, that was a great job. I learned a lot.
Oh.
And at some point I kind of thought to myself, you know what, I'd like to do this on my own and make the watches as good as they can possibly be.
Yeah.
Timex watches are nice, but you can go to Walmart and buy one for $29 and it'll last years.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make something that was at a higher level. And I didn't want to do any market research. I wanted to do it based on my gut instinct.
Yeah.
And so I would design the watches, and if I loved it, we would make it. If I didn't love it, we don't make it.
Yeah.
And so that was 14 years ago.
Wow.
And so that formula has worked really well. Yeah, so that's.
Did you know? Are you the designer for the company? Are you like the designer, the CEO? Like, do you do all the work?
Yeah, that's my favorite part. At my heart of my being, I'm an artist, I would say, and so I love the design and the engineering of the watches. And I will scrutinize every curve and every edge and every surface of the watch and I'll keep adjusting it. I'll drive the guys nuts but I won't let it go until it's exactly the way I want.
So can you go into that for me? Are you at liberty to talk about, I don't know how much is proprietary or whatever, but how, like, from inception to completion of a watch, like how that process works?
Yeah, sure. I basically will draw the initial inspiration from anywhere. I've looked at highway overpasses and saw something there that got integrated into a watch design.
Wow.
I'll look at cars. I'll look at, anything around me can lend an element of design.
Right.
And I basically do it pencil on paper is how I get it started. I'll just sketch and sketch and sketch until I hone in on the design itself, until I, kind of whittle it down. I look at it like a block of wood that I'm whittling until I finally get it down to where I want it to be.
Nice.
And then I work with guys who are CAD model engineers, and then they will take it to the next level for me and build 3D CAD models. And then we can further sculpt it on the computer that way. but I think it's a very interesting process. Yeah. And, I've been doing it for about 24 years now. So I've kind of developed a sixth sense for this design of a machine that has to be worn on your wrist. So it's got to look good. It's got to function well. It's got to be durable, and it's got to really feel good when you're wearing it.
Yeah. Is it, are all your watches manufactured here in the US, or do you manufacture outside?
It's funny. I use the analogy of that it's similar to building a car, where for every component in the watch, I've got a supplier that specializes in just manufacturing that one component. So I've got suppliers all over the world. I'll get some parts out of Hong Kong. We use Citizen Movements, which are in Japan, and they're excellent. Honestly, I feel like they're as good, if not better, than the Swiss movements.
Oh, wow.
It's like a Toyota, man. They just keep going and going.
Yeah.
We get parts out of Australia, Italy, Germany, Switzerland. And a big part of what I do is also, I see myself as kind of like the orchestra's conductor, where I've got to have all these suppliers building the parts so that when it all comes together, they all come at the same time and they all fit together perfectly.
Right.
Because we're talking about a machine that has to go underwater down to 300 or 500 meters underwater. So there's really no room for error when they all come together.
Is that how most watches are made? Like, so if you get like a Swiss made watch, when they say it's Swiss made, is that like all the moving parts, everything about that watch is made in Switzerland, or is it like the majority or the frame of it? Or
no, there's actually some big loopholes that the Swiss companies take advantage of. A lot of the parts are made in China, actually. Yep. There's a big loophole that, technically, to call it a Swiss watch, they say that 51% of the value of the watch has to originate in Switzerland. Now, but what they're allowed to do is factor in the salaries of all the office workers in the Swiss office into the cost of the watch. That one factor alone right there pushes the value of the Swiss origin way over the top. So they could get all the parts made in China if they wanted to.
Right.
And then they can assemble it in Switzerland. Yeah. But the final assembly is actually really easy to do. Yeah, I mean, you could train a monkey to do it.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool. It's interesting because, like, I think in business, that's the a conundrum, if you will, I guess, of like, you want to be profitable, you want to create a good product, and sometimes it's hard to manufacture and do everything in the United States because it's like you just can't compete with taking your business to China. It's not even comparable, because at the end of the day, right, the consumer is the one who's gonna pay the ultimate price for that.
Yeah.
So what do you think the price difference would be? Say, like, if you had a watch that's $700 that, you have manufactured at, around the world, there's parts from all over the world, right? But if you did primarily just all United States, I mean, what would would there be a huge cost difference on that?
Actually, it wouldn't even be possible right now.
Wow. Because
there are no US made watch movements, and the movement is the engine of the watch.
Interesting.
So I would have to either get the movements from Japan or Switzerland.
Wow.
But even the machining of the case, the interior of the steel case, the precision there, and the expertise to then fit all the other parts inside there correctly. To do that correctly in the US would be a huge learning curve to work with a machine company that could do it. Right. And I would say it would probably double the price of the watch.
That's what I would think, yeah.
And I would love to do it, but it really puts me into an uncompetitive position at that point.
Agreed.
I would love to. It's funny, even companies like Shinola, and they kind of hung their hat on being American made. The Federal Trade Commission went after them a couple of years ago because their stuff really wasn't made in the U.S. It was assembled in the U.S.
Right.
So, but I'm right up front. I'm transparent. I don't pull any punches. We get stuff from all over the world, and I do make sure that I'm working with excellent suppliers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that's awesome, man. So, what when you were growing up, you said that your at the core, you're an artist. Like, when you were growing up, was that something that like you were like just born with? Was it something that like you got into something that like struck your or piqued your interest into being an artist? What was that got you going?
No, I mean, I've been that way since I was probably 3 years old. My dad still has drawings that I made when I was 3 or 4 years old. And it's funny, he tells people like, oh, I used to love monkeys. When I was a kid, all I wanted was a monkey.
I love monkeys.
Aren't they
Monkeys
awesome?
and dolphins are so cool.
They are. So I used to draw pictures of monkeys. And my dad says, oh yeah, he would even draw the little lines or the wrinkles on their knuckles. So yeah, I've always been that way. If I was building a tree fort, I would draw it all out first. I'm a drummer. I grew up playing the drums my whole life. And so I drew out my ideal drum set, and I saved my money when I was in high school, and I had that drum set made for me. Yeah. But I designed it all out. So I've always been that way.
That's super rad, man.
Yeah.
And then how did like, I mean, you went into a little bit about how like you went from being a windsurfer, right, to like doing, steel sculptures and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then into working for Timex. Did you know all along, like, eventually I want to open my own shop. I want to run my own show. I don't want to work for somebody else.
Yeah, I would say that was also in me. Yeah. And it was just a matter of time before it kind of bubbled up to the surface. I never really fit that well in the corporate world. I tend to have zero tolerance for mediocrity. Yeah. It just pisses me off. And, I would sit in meetings, and my wife still jokes with me. She's like, yeah, you cannot work in the corporate world. You just do not fit. She says, you get too pissed off at people.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would sit in meetings, and if I was dealing with someone who I was depending on, and they were doing a shitty job, I'd start yelling at them and cussing at them and throwing shit at them, which is not cool to do in the corporate world.
Right. You gotta play by the rules.
Yeah, I didn't like playing by rules. I liked getting done whatever I could get done as good and as fast as possible. Yep. And I did not like the corporate politics. That didn't work for me. Yeah. So yeah. I think I'm an entrepreneur at heart.
Yeah, I talked about that a couple times on previous episodes on the podcast, how I worked for corporate America, and it just wasn't. I knew it wasn't for me. For the same reasons, where it was like you were depending on so many other people to do their job in order for your job to be a success, and there's just such a complete lack of like ownership, I guess.
Yes.
Because if I'm gonna own something, like for you, it's like NFW Watches, like that's you birthed that idea. It's your idea. It's your company. And so you take an interest on all the moving parts to make it work. But like when you're in corporate, it's like, yeah, you have a job title, but like you have so many other people that you're depending on to make sure that your job gets done successfully. And when it doesn't happen, it's like, fuck, man, and you get pissed, because it's like you want to put out a good product, but it's like you can't make other people do their job. It's difficult.
Yeah, there's that people throw around this term like, oh, it's just business. No, it's personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe for some people that don't give a shit, it's just business. But I would dive in like full on to whatever project I was working on, and it was like my blood and sweat were in that. Even if it was for Timex or for NFW, like I would give it my all. And if somebody was holding me back because they weren't doing their job, yeah, man, that would just piss me off.
What part of at the 10-year, you were there for 10 years.
Yeah.
At what point in that 10 years did you say like, this isn't going to work?
I would say at year 9.
Yeah.
Yeah. And things were going well, but I just started to get this feeling like, I want to do it better. I don't want some guy down in the finance department taking what was a great design and sucking all the life out of it so that we could save 11 cents on the production end.
Yep.
And you take a design that was really great originally, and by the time it was made, so that we can make an extra couple points of margin, now the product is watered down.
Yep.
So I wanted to do something where the design and the engineering were first and foremost.
Yeah. It's crazy. I've said that before, and I think other people have said, I'm not the one that came up with this idea, but it's like At so many times, like in corporate, doesn't matter what organization you're with or what, niche you're in, it seems like profit seems to be what makes the decision like process. It's like, okay, well, like you said, we'll shave 11 cents off this, so like, let's go ahead and like trash this idea so we can save 11 cents a unit. It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And I saw in the industry that I was in where it's like, in order to save a buck, they were cutting corners like bad, like bad, where it's like, let's save a buck. So let's cut the majority of our labor. Let's do that. Let's get rid of our guys. And I'm like, let's see how that's going to make any fucking sense. Because now you're not able to service customers that you have. Now your reputation is shitty. And so it's like you're like doing something so drastic, making a drastic decision like cutting labor that has a long lasting effect when it's in reality. If you just try to work on your efficiencies with the labor that you have, probably better off for doing it that way, I don't know. But it seems like if you do the right thing, that's what I always tell people, if you do the right thing, profit will come. It's like a byproduct of doing the right thing. Yeah. And when you let profit be the thing that's driving you, for me, it seems like you're destined to fail. Destined.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to badmouth Timex or any other company that works with that model. But for me personally, it wasn't the way I wanted to do things.
Yeah.
I wanted to, and I don't do market research either. I go by my gut. If you've ever sat in a market research focus group, it's a fascinating thing to watch because you've got a group of people sitting in a conference room. There's a one-way mirror on one wall, and people are sitting behind that mirror watching the people in the room. And the people in the room know that there's people behind that mirror staring at them.
That's weird.
Listening to them, and they're being recorded.
Right.
So you set up this weird environment, and then you're asking for their honest opinion.
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you what they're actually thinking. They're going to tell you what they think you want them to say.
Right.
And it also comes down to how the moderator asks a question. You could say, do you like design A or do you like design B?
Right.
Right? So they're going to say, oh, I like design A.
Of course you do.
So there's so much going on there. It's really hard to get to the truth. Oh. And I could see that happening many times. And I've seen companies be led down the wrong path, basing what they do on these focus groups.
Right.
So with NFW, I said, we're not doing any market research. I'm going to design it. And if I love it, I know there's enough other guys out there that are going to love it too.
Yeah.
And I don't need to sell 20,000 units of this watch. We just need to sell enough to keep the company in business and make a little profit.
Yeah. You guys have been going 14 years, so you're doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. Company could be bigger, but I just won't sell out and do it the cheap way.
Yeah, for sure. And what do you when you left Timex, how much space was in between leaving Timex and starting NFW?
It was about a 2-year process. I had originally started the company under a different name with a partner.
Yeah.
And early on, I could see that the partnership was just not going to work. I was doing most of the work. He wasn't doing anything. And he was kind of in charge of getting the company name trademarked. Oh. And at some point, I went on to the U.S. Patent Office's website to see where we were along the process of getting the trademark. And I saw that my name was no longer on there. It was him and his wife. And right then I was like, you know what, this is just not going to work. And let's put an end to this before there's anything to actually fight over.
Right.
I'm going to go off on my own and you do what you want. You take the name. I'll take the watch designs because that's the part I did. And so we had a clean break. And so then I kind of started all over again by myself. And that way I was making all the decisions.
So did you have to take like a business loan or anything? Do you mind going into like the business side of it?
Yeah. Well, this was in 2005 before the financial crisis.
Yeah.
And so I was able to secure a $100,000 line of credit.
Nice. And
based off a business plan. I really had no collateral at that point because I had just gone through a divorce and my ex-wife and I had sold the house.
Yep.
And So I really didn't own anything except my car.
Yeah.
So I had no collateral to put up,
Right.
but I put forth a good business plan, and the bank, I guess, believed in it and gave me some money.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And were you, how much fear was there in starting your own deal? Because I mean, I think a lot of people, that's where they get stuck, right? Is that they get stuck in the security of having a paycheck every 2 weeks and, benefits and all the above, you know what I mean? So how much fear was there for you, like going into like doing your own thing?
I gotta say, not a lot of fear. And I think that comes down to if you have this sort of entrepreneurial mindset or not. And I think it's an inherent thing built into some people that have a high tolerance for risk.
Yep.
I believed in what I was doing. I believed I had the talent. I believed I had the connections. And so I just felt that I didn't feel it was much of a risk because I had the confidence that I could do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have a non-compete with Timex? Did they make you sign anything where it's like, oh, you can't like compete with us?
No, they didn't.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. They're a good company. And I still have friends there.
Yeah.
And I really don't see myself as a competitor to them because our watches are selling for, on average $300 to $500 or $600 versus a Timex, for like $39 or $49.
Yeah, not even in the same.
Yeah. So we're at a different level. It's like, I'm not a competitor to Rolex, on the high end, really.
Right.
I'm sort of in the middle here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Totally awesome. Do you think if you never would have got that job at Timex, do you think NFW would have ever been started?
Oh, definitely not.
No. That's interesting.
I didn't even wear a watch before I went to Timex.
Isn't that crazy how Steve Jobs said it, like where you connect the dots looking backward, it's like,
yeah,
wow, if that wouldn't have happened, if this wouldn't have happened, if this wouldn't happen, then this wouldn't have been.
Yeah, it's funny because you can make all the life plans you want, but that's no guarantee that your life is going to go that way.
For sure.
And in a way, I kind of like that. You don't know where one thing is going to lead you to.
Yeah.
For example, we do a lot of work with veteran support organizations now, and we raise a lot of money and awareness for them. And that was not part of the original business plan. It evolved into that, and I'm so happy it did. I love that. That's the best part of my business right now is working with veterans, and I get personally involved with the organizations. I don't just design them a watch and send them money. I love to, and some of my best friends are these guys now.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Where do you see NFW Watches like going? What's your goal?
Right now, I really want to scale the company up and make it bigger.
Yep.
I want to be able to work with more veteran support organizations. Basically, it comes down to the bigger we are and the stronger we are, the more people we can help.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And that's what it's about for me. I want to leave a legacy for my kids. I want to show my kids that, look, you can have a company, you can be profitable, you can be a strong company, but you can help a lot of people along the way.
Yeah. It's like social responsibility, when you get that big.
Yeah, absolutely.
What, lost my train of thought there. Sorry, buddy. So NFW, like as far as scaling it, how are you going to scale it? Like what are some ways that you're thinking about scaling the company?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I honestly haven't figured it all out yet. I'm in the process of that. I'm getting some really excellent business coaching. The reason I'm out here in California, I was meeting with this guy, Bedros Keuilian, and who's a super successful entrepreneur. Yep. And he kind of believes in the mission of NFW, so he asked me to come out here and so that he could do some coaching with me on how to scale up the business. Yeah. And so that's kind of what we're working on. What's the best strategy to take for that?
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Bedros is, I've never personally met him, but I've attended one of his fit body boot camps. My wife was going to one, so she was like, hey, why don't you go check it out? So I did. And it's actually I don't know if they're all the same circuit that they do every fit body boot camp, but the circuit I did it was actually challenging, man. It was really hard.
Yeah.
But I dig it. I think it's really cool, and I look forward to hopefully meeting him soon.
Yeah.
Getting him on the podcast and hearing his backstory.
Yeah, he's got a great backstory.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I won't put it out there, so I'll let you interview him to get it. But but yeah, I mean, he's a guy that has come from nothing.
For sure.
Yeah.
What would you say your guys' mission statement is? Do you guys have like a mission statement for NFW?
Yeah, I mean, it really boils down to what we call badass with a big heart, and that's not about me. I'm not a badass. But the idea is that we've got a lot of guys who are, what you would consider to be a badass.
Yeah.
Well,
two guys that I mentioned that were wearing your watches are definitely badasses: Joshua Coburn and Ray Kerr, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, like Josh Coburn and Ray too. Both guys who are fit, strong, badass mindset people.
Yep.
And they're both all about helping other people. And so they fit what NFW is all about perfectly. Sure. Yeah. I mean, literally, they would be the poster boys of NFW, and they are, really. Badass with a big heart. That's what we're about, and that's what they're about.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So I want you to go kind of into, if you don't mind, going into like your backstory. Like, what is your backstory? I mean, we talked about the company, but what is your personal backstory, if you don't mind sharing that?
Yeah. How far back you want to go?
As far as you want to go, brother.
I would say I've always had a strong work ethic drilled into me since I was a kid.
Yeah.
My dad grew up as a really poor kid in the streets of Philadelphia.
Nice.
He had nothing.
That's where my dad's from, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for sure. My brother was born there, and my dad's from Philly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right, cool.
Small world.
But my dad, I mean, they literally had nothing. And he used to sell shopping bags outside of department stores.
Interesting.
I guess back in those days, you go into a store, they didn't put your stuff in a bag when they sold it to you.
Right.
So my dad would sell shopping bags to people who were walking into the store.
Nice.
And so the police would come and chase him away. I guess he wasn't supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So he'd run around the block and come back and do it again.
Yep.
And so he always had that strong work ethic, and he put it into us as kids, myself, my brother, my sister. And I've been working every day since I was like 11 years old. I had a paper route. I'd be up at 4:00 in the morning delivering papers, trudging through the snow. That was on some days the snow was up to my waist, and I was out there every morning delivering papers.
Dude, how do you deal with papers in snow like that?
Dude, it was hard. It was hard. And for very little money.
Right.
But I was a kid, whatever.
Yeah.
I picking tobacco. I picked tobacco, which is a really hard job. Wow. Really hard. I did hot tar roofing, which is another brutal job. You're up on the roof, tarring the roof of a Walmart. It's 140 degrees on the roof, and you're working with molten tar.
Ugh.
It's brutal physical labor.
Yeah.
So I've always done hard work.
Yeah. What did your dad do? Like, what was his profession?
My dad is the best salesman I've ever met.
Yeah.
He could sell you anything.
Yep.
Because that's how he survived since he was a little kid, selling. But he worked for a company called McGraw-Hill, which is a big book publisher. But they also...
It sounds like super familiar. It's probably on our school books, right?
Yeah. They're a big book publisher. But they also had a division in the construction area, in the construction business, where they would gather up all the information that architects had on the drawing boards for building commercial buildings. And then the drawings will go out to all the contractors to bid on the project, for the electrical work or the plumbing or, whatever. And my dad would sell that information to the construction contractors.
Right.
So he was always in sales.
That's awesome, man.
And then on the side, he always had a business at home building wrought iron railings for people.
Wow.
And so I kind of grew up welding and working with metal. And that's how I ended up getting into the metal sculpture.
That's a skill I always wish I had, actually, was welding. I started the school, I went to an adult school for welding or whatever. And then my back had other plans for me, but maybe I'll go back and get that cert. I don't know.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a lot of fun.
It's a good skill to have, because if shit breaks, it's just weld it together. And if you know how to do it, it's all good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, for sure.
Welding, grinding the steel. Yeah. Yeah. The sparks are flying.
Yeah. So your dad was a sales guy. And then what about mom?
My mom was she literally grew up as a coal miner's daughter.
So is she from Pennsylvania too?
Yeah, yeah. She's from out in the sticks.
Okay.
In Pennsylvania. And so she grew up very, very poor as well. Yeah. And, she was always, a secretary, executive assistant. Yep. Also a hard worker. And so that was my model, hard work. Yep. Hard work and sports. I always played sports. I loved being physical. My dad was into buying and selling houses all the time, so we would move around a lot. Wow. And so I was always kind of this new kid in school. Yeah. And I'm not a big person. I'm kind of a short guy. So, and I was a small kid too. Right. And but I had that fire in my belly, and I was always a new kid in school, and so inevitably the school bullies would come and pick on me as the new kid. Right. And I would beat the shit out of them. Yeah. And that became my MO. When every time I moved into a new town and go to a new school, I would do that. And so then that was how I made my way.
Yeah, for sure.
And I played football. I played a lot of sports. I loved it.
What was your sport of choice?
The football.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. I was a running back.
Nice.
I loved it.
Yeah, football was great, man.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those. I was talking to somebody the other day how if I look at all the guys that I played football with that I grew up with, and we all played football pretty much our whole lives, like since we were, I started in 6 years old when we started tackle football, and so I played for 18 years or whatever it was, 12 years, 13 years. But if I look at all the guys that I played with, even through high school, most of those guys are pretty successful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that there's something to be said about playing team sports, about discipline, about hard work, dedication, commitment, all these things that like are ingrained in you. While it's like everyone else is partying and doing their thing in summertime and whatever, we're doing two-a-days, we're doing hell week. We're doing all these like shitty things that like most kids are not doing, or people that aren't playing those sports are not doing. And I'm not saying that we're any more successful than the kids that weren't. I'm just saying that there is a common thread amongst most of the guys that I grew up with that we're all doing pretty well for ourselves. And I think it has a lot to do with that initial foundation being set. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, I think you're right, because I think what it does is it kind of sows the seeds in you, at a very impressionable age. Yeah. You're learning this never quit mindset. Yeah. And, sure. And physicality. I think the mind and the body work best together when they're both, functioning at top speed.
Absolutely.
Optimum level.
Yeah. I think that carries over in adulthood too, because like, I was telling my wife this the other day how for me, I felt like what's been missing because of all of my surgeries and whatnot, and recovering from that, the physical side of things was missing for me. Because like when I was growing up, I played sports, and then when I was done with sports, I was doing MMA, and when I was done with MMA, I would get into something else physical. It's always like very physical, but that's when I felt the best. That's when I felt I was on top of my game, and that when I'm the happiest, when I'm like the most fulfilled, is when I'm challenging myself. Like the more I'm like challenged, whether it be doing a fast or whether it be doing like like the challenge I'm doing this month is 100 miles in the month, so I have 3.57 miles to do every day, whether it be walking, running, hiking, whatever. So challenging myself physically always makes me feel better, like as a person. I feel like I can do more, I have more to give. So that's interesting though that you play football, and then here you are, successful guy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I still love. I don't play football anymore, obviously, but, right. I love, the last few years, actually the last 6 or 7 years, I've been running a lot of Spartan races and Tough Mudder races. And I love that feeling of pushing myself physically right to the brink, where, my body is just saying, just back it off a notch. We can't keep this up. But my mind is saying, no. We're going full speed. We got 2 more miles to go. Right. We're not quitting. And you're crawling through the mud. You're scaling walls. It's a very visceral feeling.
Which one's harder?
What's that?
Tough Mudder or Spartan?
Spartan for sure. Yeah. And it's interesting being the owner of a watch company. Right. I noticed one I would say it's the main factor between those two races is that Tough Mudders are not timed. There's no clock running. Oh, wow. So you see a lot of people out on the course that are really not in good shape, and they're walking the course. They're taking it really slow. Yeah. Where a Spartan race, because it's an actual race, the clock is ticking. Yeah. People are trying to go as fast as they can. They're trying to win. Yeah. You know, in Tough Mudder, there's no winner. In Spartan race, there is a winner. And I'm competitive by nature, so I like the clock ticking. Yeah. I want to win.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I've never done a Tough Mudder, and I've never done a Spartan race. But after, we talked a little bit before the podcast, it's like, I think I need to get into that, man. I need to do one. Because I think that's part of, I don't know if it's innate in humans or innate in men or whatever, but like challenging yourself is kind of like just one of those things, man. You got just got to do it, and I was shocked when you told me how old you were, by the way. But
I could be your dad.
Yeah, so he's like sharing his age with me. I'm like, what? But the fact that you're still doing it, you're still getting after it. You know what I mean? And it's like, so it's not something that like, hopefully for me, that doesn't ever die off. I'm always going to be looking for that next challenge, like what's next,
Yeah, I see no reason to back it off a notch. Right. Not at all, And
did you ingrain that same competitiveness into your sons?
That's a good question. I've tried. Right. My oldest son is not an athlete. Right. And for a while, I was really having a hard time relating to him. But what I did, he's an artist.
Right. Just like his dad.
Right. So, I was this weird hybrid of artist, athlete, Yeah. Where he's an artist all the way, and he's much better than I am.
Right.
So I'm able to relate to him in that way. And we get along great. So that's kind of our thing. My daughter is the athlete. Yeah. She's so competitive, and she's so strong-willed. Yeah. I've never won an argument with her, and I never will. I just won't. She's so stubborn.
That's awesome.
But it will serve her well in her life. Yeah. And she's a competitive gymnast. She's got the 6-pack abs. She is all muscle. Yeah. Pound for pound, she's the strongest person in our family.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I want to get my sons into that. I have 4 boys, and I want to get them into gymnastics, and that's, the guys I grew up with even, they're like, oh, you're going to have your boys playing football? I was like, nope. Yeah. And they're like, what? You don't want your boys playing football? I was like, absolutely not. That's the last thing I want my boys doing. Because I think it was good for me, like growing up, like it was definitely a great outlet, to keep me out of a bunch of trouble and whatever. But I had a different upbringing, than my boys do. So it's like they don't need that kind of an outlet, And I look at my body and like how beat up it is, with 6 back surgeries and multiple knee surgeries and whatever. Granted, not all of that is as a result of football, but I'd say a large majority of it probably is.
Yeah.
And I saw my sons don't need that, And I think with gymnastics, it carries over into so many other things in life. You know what I mean? Like if you're good in gymnastics, you could be an amazing wrestler. You could be an amazing football player at some point if you want to.
Sure.
So I really want to get them started. I have a 12-year-old, which I think he's a lost cause in that department. Like it's like he's not gonna do gymnastics. I could try to talk him into it, but I doubt it. And then the 4-year-old, the 2-year-old, and the newborn, or 4 months old. I think they're all gonna get into it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, no, you're right. Gymnastics is great for the entire body, and it teaches you balance, how to maintain your orientation when you're spinning through the air. Like my daughter does these flips off the balance beam, and when she's upside down, she knows where her body is within space, and she'll land on her feet. Right. And I find that amazing. She's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a trip. Like when I started working at that company, we talked about this also offline about the company MoveU that I'm working with. And I never knew, I guess I never knew the importance of like proper body mechanics and movement. It's kind of like I just muscled my way through everything. Like I just stop being a pussy and just go for it, And I never really gave it too much thought until, obviously 6 back surgeries later. And I'm like, I'm obviously doing something wrong here. This can't all be congenital and like whatever. Like I'm the common denominator here. But looking into that, it's like, yeah, that's why I think for my boys, it's like, no, they need to get them into gymnastics, like, so they can learn proper body mechanics and proper body control. You know what I mean? Like working on a balance beam, like what? You'd never catch me on one of those things right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe at some point, but definitely not now.
Yeah. Or, you know, even when she's doing what they call the floor exercise where, you know, she's flipping and spinning across the floor.
Just watching it.
Oh my God. Yeah. She does these backflips. It's amazing. Yeah.
That's a trip.
But yeah, the human body is this cool machine of levers and pulleys.
Yep.
And it can do amazing things.
For sure. So where do you see NFW going? Like, I know you're trying to scale it, but where do you see it going? Like, what's the direction you're trying to take it in?
Well, one thing we just got the signed license agreement to make watches for the U.S. Army.
Nice, man! Congratulations.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's going to be something I got to actually get started on it next week. Nice, is man. All the design work for the Army watches.
That's really cool.
So that's going to be a big thing. And you know, it's funny. Like we need to get onto Amazon in order to scale the business too. Yeah. Because Amazon sold several million watches just over the holiday season last year. Yeah. And not one of those was an NFW.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So although I love selling direct, I think working through Amazon will help us scale the business, you know. And in a way, we'll still be selling direct because of the way the Amazon model is. We'll still be the ones. I still want to control some of the fulfillment. We'll do all the shipping. And so I think that's an area to explore, you know.
How much of the profit do they take from that, if you don't mind me asking? Because I have no clue how Amazon even works.
Yeah, it's pretty complex. It depends on how much work they do for you, as far as how much, you know, how high up does your product appear, you know, when someone puts in a search for watches or Army watches, you know, how high up the ladder do you get? Or is Amazon handling the shipping? Is it Amazon Prime? You know, so there's a lot of factors, and the more that they do, the more cut they take.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's still a smaller take than most of the traditional retailers would get.
Right.
They just work on a big volume model.
So what's your biggest platform at the moment? Is it at your actual website where people can go and buy the watches?
It is, right. Yeah. We used to sell through jewelry stores.
Yep.
And honestly, the internet is really hurting the retail jewelers because people will buy a diamond ring online now.
Yeah.
You know, 15 years ago, they were scared to buy a diamond ring online. Not anymore. And so we pulled out of all the jewelers because honestly, they were having a hard time paying us.
Yeah.
And we had so many people that were not geographically located near one of our jewelers, and they would come to us direct and say, "Hey, I love your watches, but there's no jeweler near me. You know, you don't have a dealer near me. Can I just buy one from you guys?" Yeah. And so that became more and more and more. So at some point I said, you know what? Let's make this a direct-to-consumer business. We can lower the retail prices because we're basically now cutting out that middleman.
Yep.
So the people putting their money down for a watch are going to get a better price. We'll still make what we need to make on it. And we'll also now have this direct link to the guy who's buying our watch. And I love that. I've made so many friends from guys who've bought our watches. I don't even like to call them customers,
right? Because
I don't think of them that way. I think of them as my friends.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And you know, there's a lot of valuable information to be gained there too. Yeah. You know, they'll tell me what they like, what they don't like, and you know, and I'll really listen to them.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, like sharing, like how do you get those connections as far as like you're gonna be making watches for the U.S. Army? How'd that even come about? How'd you do that?
I did some research, and I found out that a lot of licensing is handled through licensing agencies.
Right.
And there's a licensing agency in New York City that handles all the programs for the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
And you know, tying back to my days at Timex, where I handled all the contracts for the Disney watches, I knew my way around a licensing contract. So I knew all the ins and outs of it. I knew the pitfalls, what to watch out for. because Disney's really the master at licensing.
Yeah.
So I learned from the master. And so I contacted the Army's agency and said, hey, this is what we do. We work with veterans. We raise funds for veterans. We're not a big company. I can't sign up for a big guaranteed minimum on the contract, but I would love to make watches for the Army. And they got back to me and said, why don't you come on into New York, show us what you've got, and we'll take a look. And so I did that, and they loved everything we were doing. And so we worked out a good deal.
That's really awesome, man.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions that I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. Usually I wait till the very end of the podcast, but I figured this would be a good time to ask you, because we're talking about business and licensing and stuff like that. So if you had one lesson, I'm going to reword this question, because I've worded it a different way. It just sounds like every time I listen to it, I'm like, maybe I should change it a little bit. If there was one lesson that you've learned in business, or in life, along the way, that you could impart on somebody else, like the biggest lesson that you've learned, what would it be and why?
I'd say if you have a choice of taking the easy route or the hard route, take the hard route. The easy route is not rewarding. The hard route that you really have to work for will give you the most reward, and you'll learn more by taking the hard route. You can take the sidewalk, or you can take this rocky, rooted, rough trail. You may have to cross a couple rivers of ice cold water.
Right.
But at the end, you'll feel so much better. And along the way, it'll be so much more interesting than just taking the sidewalk.
What were some of the rocks and the roots that you had along this business journey that you've been on?
We've had some manufacturing difficulties that we had to overcome.
Yep.
We've had clients who, without ill will, just were not able to pay us when they needed to pay us.
Right.
And so we had to figure out a way to get by without that money until they could pay us.
Yep.
And then you try to be creative. What's that expression? Necessity is the mother of what is that? Mother of invention. Do you know that one?
No, I don't know that one.
All right. Well, forget the old saying. Here it is. You got to get creative when you have to be, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, like, for example, we had some of the steel watch cases come in one time from our supplier they were coated with this black material to make black watches, and they were not secured properly while they were in transit. So the watch case is the metal housing of the watch, right? Yeah. So they were smashing into each other and bouncing off each other while they're on the road, And so when I opened up the box, these metal cases were not pristine. They were scratched and dented and beat up. Yep. And it was like, oh no, do we throw them out? That'd be like throwing away, like, I think it was like $30,000. And I was like, no, you know what? Let's try an experiment. Because one of our customers one time had intentionally distressed his watch. Yeah. He took some tools to it and distressed it. And it looked really cool. It had a great look to it. Yeah. I said, I've always been wanting to do this. Let's distress a couple of these and see how it looks. And I'll learn about distressing the finish, where we scratch off the finish and we, rough it up. And so I tried a couple and they didn't look that great. And I tried a couple more and they looked better. And then I really learned like the technique to distress this finish. And so then I put it out there to our customers. I said, we're now offering distressed watches. Look how cool this is. And the guys loved it.
That's awesome.
So we totally flip-flopped that bad situation and turned it into a very good situation. Yeah. And so
were you able to recoup any of the cost on the damaged product, or
what's that?
Were you able to recoup any of the cost on getting the product to kind of less than satisfactory when you initially got it?
No, I didn't even bother. We just distressed them, and we actually charge a little more for that because now
that's really cool.
Now we're doing extra work on the watch.
Talk about taking a silver lining, man. That's really That's awesome, man. That's really cool. You turned a really bad or potentially bad situation and made it a great one, you know?
Yeah. When you own a business, you've got to think of creative ways to turn bad situations into positives. You have to.
It's funny, like not even in business, but like, I was talking to one of the guys on the podcast, and I asked him what the common thread was amongst special operators.
Yeah.
You know, what gives them that mindset to be able to like just achieve like these, like almost like inhuman like qualities, like they can get through anything and put the body and the mind through things that most people like dream about. It's like, this is crazy. His answer was creativity, and it shocked me. I was like, oh wow, creativity. He said, well, yeah, you gotta be creative. You gotta find ways to get shit done. You gotta find ways to break through and to get through the next evolution or whatever the case may be. And in business, I guess it's no different. You know what I mean? Like you got to be creative.
Yeah, you're right. And, I've gotten to be very good friends with some of the guys from the 7th Special Forces Group, Army Green Berets.
Yep.
And, what they engage in is called unconventional warfare.
Right.
Unconventional means you've got to get creative, really, because you're not, it's taking the hard path.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I dig that. If you had one person or one book that inspired you the most in your life, like who would that person be, or what would that book be, and why?
Oh, there was a book I read. I was probably like 20 years old. It was a book called The Power of One.
Yeah.
And I think there was a movie made of it. And I think Morgan Freeman was in it, but the book was excellent. The Power of One. It was about this kid in South Africa who was sort of this downtrodden little kid who wanted to be a boxer, and he became a boxer. And it was about what he went through and the transformation that he went through to become this boxer. And it was a very powerful book.
The Power of One.
The Power of One, of him.
Check that out.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for people to connect with you personally? If people want to get in touch with you, want to get in touch with NFW Watches, they want to maybe collaborate with you or whatever, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and make that happen?
Sure. Yeah, they can email me directly at gfox@nfwonline.com, and I'd be happy to reply. They can also take a look at us on Instagram, nfw.watch.company, I think is it, or Facebook. And I try to do all the interaction myself, and I love to be personally involved with our customers. I'm kind of the face of the brand, the voice of the brand, and I think that keeps it more authentic. So I love engaging with all of our customers.
Who came up with the logo? Did you do that?
Yes.
And why the Tridents? Because when I saw the Tridents, I was like, oh, he must have been like an ex-Navy SEAL or something like that, because it was the first thing that came to mind. I mean, it's badass no matter what, but like, what birthed that idea?
Yeah, that's funny you ask, because Jason Redman and I were talking about that at dinner last night. He asked me the same thing. Yeah. Being a Navy SEAL, he wanted to know, like, hey, what's with that Trident?
Right.
And it is just a total coincidence that we work with Navy SEALs now. Yeah. And when I had originally designed the logo, it was, I had that background of being in the ocean a lot, being a pro windsurfer. So I always had that kind of nautical influence, and I loved the look, just the overall design of a trident. Yeah. It's got a very symmetrical design to it.
Yep.
So just as a shape, I loved it. Yep. And it's also the common denominator across all of our watches. Every second hand on our watch is that Trident logo. Yeah. And it just so happens that, designing that also, not just as the logo, but as the second hand, not to get too technical, but when you're designing the hand of a watch, the hand goes through what are called inertia tests. So the hand, when it's sitting on the watch, has to be very well balanced. It has to be perfectly balanced. If it's off balance, it'll put too much torque on the motor of the watch.
Right.
And the Trident, you've got your cantilevered long end of the second hand that sticks out towards the numbers. And then you've got the tail of it. So the Trident tail of the second hand is perfectly balanced with the cantilevered long end of the second hand.
Nice.
So it works out perfectly.
And do you go through this whole process like on your own, or you have people that you're working with to like make all those parts work? Did you learn that while you were at Timex? I guess is what I'm asking.
I did. I'm not a trained engineer,
Right.
you know, classically trained.
Right.
It was, for me, it was like on the job training.
That's awesome.
And you know, I think being an artist at heart and engineer, I love that stuff. So
Super cool.
I find it extremely interesting. So, you know, I think whatever you like, you're more apt to learn better.
For sure.
And so I do work with real engineers.
Yeah.
But I oversee everything, and I really push them. I really push them hard.
Right.
To, you know, sometimes we'll run into design problems that they don't think will work. Right. And so then we have to work together to come up with a creative design or engineering solution to bring my vision to reality.
Right.
And we always do.
It's like Steve Jobs, man. Same thing.
No.
He wasn't an engineer, right? Like by
Right.
a classically trained engineer,
Right.
but the same thing, they called it his reality distortion field or whatever, where like he had an idea that he had come up with, and he'd work with the engineers, you know, and be like, no, we need to make this happen. And like it seemed like it was impossible, but somehow, some way, he always managed to come through.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of it, you know, comes down to some common sense as well.
Right.
Like I've worked on a lot of digital watch products as well, and you know, if you let the software engineers run the show, then you know the thing can be impossible to figure out how to use it. To them, it's easy because they're the engineers, but to the average person, they won't know how to use the product.
Right.
So you've got to really push them so that it's a user-friendly product, but it still does what you want it to do.
For sure.
For like, we make all the watches for the NFL referees.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, man, you guys are doing big things.
Yeah, we
Love it.
got some cool stuff going.
That's really cool.
And so the NFL came to me and said, look, the referees have certain things that they want a watch to do, and we cannot find one in the market that does what they want.
Yeah.
Can you guys do it? I said, well, send me what you want it to do, and I'll take a look. And basically, the biggest thing they wanted the watch to do is, you know, when there's a timeout in the game,
Yep.
and there's a dispute over, you know, when the clock was stopped.
Right.
So they may need to add, you know, a couple seconds on or take a couple seconds off the clock.
Yep.
They wanted to be able to stop the watch and very easily, quickly add a couple seconds on or take them off. And they couldn't find a watch to do that. So I talked to, you know, the software engineers, and sure enough, we figured it out. We figured out a nice, simple, easy way to make the watch do exactly that. And so every year we replenish the NFL referees with their new watches. And then it has also trickled down to college and high school and across any other sport that is time-based. You know, so for example, like baseball or golf would not apply, but lacrosse, soccer, any time-based sport. So we designed the software to be adaptable to whatever time format that sport is in.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So do you offer any like solar powered watches, or is it all battery?
Yeah, we're all battery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between, I mean, is there like, do you see a performance difference whether you have a battery or you have a solar powered watch?
Not really. Not really. You do have limitations in the design, the colors, things like that.
Right.
But you know, any of our quartz watches that have a battery, we are now using. We've got a 10-year battery life.
Oh wow!
So the thing will run nonstop for 10 years before you even have to think about a new battery. So
that's really cool.
So that kind of makes the whole point kind of moot anyway.
Right.
And then we also do a lot of automatic self-winding movements that have no battery at all.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What would you say your niche market is right now?
You know,
who do you think you appeal to the most?
We appeal. This is an interesting thing that I've noticed. There's a real crossover of interests. So we know that if a guy is into either guns, knives, cars, whiskey, or cigars,
yes,
that he would love NFW.
Oh yeah.
And it holds true.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Say those again. What were they again? This is cars, whiskey, guns,
knives, cars, whiskey,
cigars. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm thinking it over my head. I'm like, yeah, actually, yeah. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And also, cool. And tattoos is another common factor.
Yep.
See?
There you go. Super cool, man.
Yeah.
Hey, George, honestly, I really appreciate you, reaching out to me, let me know you're going to be in California. We were able to make this podcast happen. I'm super excited to see what happens with NFW. I personally love your brand. I think it's badass. And I'd be honored. I mean, I'm going to end up buying one of these watches, man, because I want to rock your brand for you. Because I think it's great. And I'm excited, seriously excited to see what's happening. I mean, it seems like you guys are doing great things. You're in with the NFL, in with the Army. I mean, sky's the limit for you guys. And it's such a cool story to see people that are you didn't have the typical, I guess, trajectory into owning your own watch company. You know what I mean? It's I never even wore a watch before I worked at Timex, you know?
Yeah.
And it's a true testament to you never know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? You never know what opportunities are going to come in front of you, and you just put it all together later, you know? It's super exciting, man.
Well, it's one of these stories, it's like that traditional American story, where a guy, wants to do something, he puts his heart and soul into it, he puts down his money, and and he can flourish.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you again, man, for coming on. And I sincerely look forward to linking up with you when I'm back on the East Coast.
Yeah.
If you're ever in California, please reach out so we can link up. And if there's anything I can ever do for you, please don't ever hesitate to ask, man.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Josh. That was a pleasure, man. Thank you.
Awesome, brother. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to My Backstory. Stay motivated and stay connected off the show. Follow at my_backstory_ to be a part of the journey to recovery and to see where your story goes. Or visit us online at hereismybackstory.com.